Hello everyone, and welcome to this Bannerflow webinar on how to evaluate your MarTech solutions in a changing market. My name is Ovidiu Mihai-Marginean, and I have today with me to help us successfully navigate the marketing landscape, Linda Gyzander, who's a senior consultant from Miltton, and she will help us with understanding a bit how do we go about navigating the MarTech landscape. Linda, welcome.
Thank you, and hi everyone. Nice to see you out there. So, should I start by introducing myself a bit? My name is Linda Gyzander. I work as a consultant at Miltton Insights in Stockholm. And before Miltton, I worked as a CRM manager and business development within CRM, different roles within marketing automation and implementing systems and everything that has to do with CRM issues and topics. That is my expertise, and I'm more into the people and process topics. And Ovi, you are more into the tech and data processes. Let's hear about that.
Yes, indeed. So I actually started as a performance marketer a while back, transitioned into product marketing, and I'm now leading the demand generation efforts at Bannerflow. And throughout this process, I have had the opportunity to purchase quite a few MarTech solutions, if we're talking about CRM systems, or if we're talking about different analytical systems, or also if we're talking about collaboration software as well.
Yeah.
And throughout this journey, I think that one of the main challenges that I've had to do with making sure that you are choosing the right solution. And this is one of the main topics that we will be talking about today. And obviously, first and foremost, we'll have a look at the current MarTech landscape to understand a bit and gain some background in terms of its development in the recent years, but also then jumping in and exploring some of the best practices that have to do with evaluating the new solutions, the new MarTech solutions that we might need to fulfill our goals, to fulfill our business needs. We will also discuss some of the common pitfalls when evaluating solutions, and also talk a bit about how to maximize our ROI and the total cost of ownership. What, why, and how do we calculate it?
Yeah.
And a few housekeeping things. We will have a section for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to add all of your questions in the question section on the right side of your screen, and we will cover them in the time slot for question and answers. And if by any chance we don't get to your question, we will follow up in the upcoming days by email. Also, we will have a recording that's going to be sent out to everyone that has registered to the webinar. So, Linda, let's get to it.
Yeah, really interesting. Should we talk a bit about the MarTech industry and its growth, Ovi?
Yes, I think so. And with 2003 already on, I think that we are seeing a big increase in what's happening currently in the MarTech landscape. So the macroeconomic headwinds colliding with the growing expectations of customers and also emerging new technologies is forcing us as marketers to make sure that we provide the best experience, that we are more innovative and also more creative than we have been in the past. And with that being said, if we're looking at one of the recent studies that Chief MarTech has done, there are currently up to 10,000 solutions, MarTech solutions out there, obviously in different categories. And the growth since 2020, so in the last 2.5 years, has been more than 20%, more exactly 24%. And taking all of this in consideration, it can be a bit overwhelming to know where to start. How do you actually make the most out of the solutions that you have, and how do you make sure that they align with your business needs?
Yes, definitely. And I also just want to mention here that you said, Ovi, that there is over 10,000 different solutions out there. And it can be, it can be hard, it can be overwhelming to know where to start. But I just want to say that we should try to simplify this, I think, because there is a lot of complex solutions and namings and so on that if you're working with MarTech or marketing actually, it could be hard to like, do I really know what this means, or how does this affect me and my organization? It seems too complex, I need help. And that might be the case, but just simplify it and have a sort of a common sense approach to it. Because we are all users, we are all customers somewhere, and we experience this every day. So just sometimes we should just back up and think about that, I believe. Just simplify it and common sense.
Exactly.
So when you're about to start thinking, okay, what is the right MarTech solution for me? Or what is the right tool? Well, I am sorry to say, if I had that answer, I would be really rich right now, right? But there is no right or wrong solution. It all depends on your plan. I mean, you should have a plan for what you want to do, who you want to do it to, in which channel you want to do it, kind of a strategy for your marketing, of course. And if you have the plan, try to stick with it. Of course, everything can change, and it will change, and you should be prepared that changes will come. But try to have a clear plan and stick to it. That's the first thing you should do. And also have your different target groups in focus, because there are consumers out there. There are your customers, and that's the most important thing about your solutions, actually. It's not you, it's your customers or your potential customers. Have that in mind. It's their experience that you are building a system for.
So having a bit of an outside-in perspective.
I would say so. Of course, there is two parts of it. It's the internal part that is more about the people and the processes and how you treat the data internally and how you fetch all your data, of course, and the technical solutions. But remember why you are doing this, why you invest so much money in this. It's because you have customers and you have potential customers out there, and it's your brand. It's about that. So I think it's important to have that outside perspective. And also, as I said, your most important targets. Is it to acquire more customers? Is it growth? Or is it to make your current customer base loyal? Is it upsell or cross sales, or what is it? That should be something included, of course, in your strategy.
So basically, more or less having everything that your plan aligned with your business needs and challenges.
I would say so, because your MarTech strategy or your CRM strategy or whatever you name it should be directly connected to the business overall goals, of course. And that is not always the case, but try to make it the case, I would say, because then it's so much easier for you to understand if the system or solution is really beneficial for you, and it's easier to internally align it with your stakeholders. So choosing the right MarTech solution, it's a complex topic, but we will talk more about it.
But when we're thinking about the MarTech landscape in its entirety, we know that there are quite a lot of categories currently, and I think before jumping in, it might be relevant for us to have a look at what are those categories and what has happened in the categories, specifically when we're talking about the recent events that have happened in the world, if we're talking about the pandemic and how this has affected the MarTech landscape, or basically if we're talking about the changes in the behavior of consumers as well. So that being said, again, referencing a bit the Chief MarTech resource, we know that almost all of the MarTech solutions can be categorized in one of the 6 categories that have to do with advertising and promotion, with content and experience, with social and relationships, commerce and sales, data and management. And by looking at what happened in the last couple of years, we can definitely see that some of these categories have grown quite a lot. And one of the categories that has grown the most is commerce and e-sales, which has grown with about 24%, followed by content and experience with 34%, and management solutions with 67%. So I think that looking at the first 2 categories, if we're talking about commerce and sales, content and relationship, that makes a lot of sense, especially if we are considering the customer experience, and those solutions can have a great impact on the customer experience. And the management category, that seems to have quite a lot to do with how people are, or how the way that we work is changing, has changed, and is constantly changing, and including us being more present in either, for example, online, but also being working more hybrid or remote working, and so on. So basically tackling those challenges. So that being said, we see that there's quite a big growth in a lot of the categories in the marketing landscape as a whole. But then, Linda, my question is, with all of this growth and new technology popping in, how do we make sense of it all? How can we, where do we start actually?
Yeah, where do you start? That's a good question. So either you have a current solution or a current tool. I mean, it could be anything from one single tool to a number of different tools connected to each other. But let's say that you are after purchasing a new solution for yourself. You don't really know, what am I going to use it for? Do I need something else? What kind of data sources do you have? You probably start from carte blanche. My takes from this is to, I mean, you are working in an organization, you are going to be dependent on your tech colleagues, your data scientist colleagues, your business colleagues. That it's so important to have your key stakeholders with you when you start looking at different solutions for your organizations. But make it to a logical level. The more people you involve, the more discussions you're going to get, and the less decisions you're going to get. Because people that tend to not work with these questions or these topics operationally, they tend to, they want to have more knowledge about it. They want to go into the details. And then you end up spending a lot of time explaining everything from data sources to integrations to channel strategies. Don't do that. But I would say.
Linda, from your experience, do you have any recommendations on how we should approach this? Any frameworks potentially to manage the stakeholders?
Yeah, but maybe the RASI method could be something to use. So you basically identify your different stakeholders and what kind of role they have in this kind of project, if you would name it that way. So every people involved in the project, they know what role they have in it. So they know if they are supposed to take any decisions, if they are just supposed to be informed, or if they are just supposed to be accountable, for example. So you can Google on that one, but it's a good method to use, I believe. But be sure to limit the number of persons in this kind of project. And also set clear KPIs of what you want to do with your tool or your solution. If you know what you're aiming for, it's so much easier to evaluate the different options that you have. And be clear with those KPIs when you are meeting different vendors, for example. And it could also be challenges connected to the KPIs. Maybe you haven't set the exact KPIs yet, but you know what challenges you have. Be clear about that. And to know that, of course, you need to talk to different stakeholders within the organization. But that's an important part. And also, as we have talked about earlier, to have the overall business goals and targets in mind also, because your stakeholders, they need to understand the benefits with the solution or the tool, and how you can contribute to the overall business targets. That's important.
So getting a bit of buy-in from the stakeholders as well when implementing or thinking about implementing new solutions. Yes, absolutely.
And you need to understand that if you're involved in this kind of project, if you're working as a CRM manager or something else, MarTech team member, you should be the person out there in your organization really missioning for this. You should be talking about this every day and explain to people what it is and what we can do within the organization if we have this kind of tool or this kind of solution. You are the missionary here, so take on that hat and just get out there and talk about it. That's important too. And also something that I have experienced a lot is the importance of the cooperation between the business part and the tech part, because as you probably have experienced throughout the years when you talk about marketing and different tech tools, sometimes we work in silos. We have been doing it a lot earlier and previously, and it has gotten better, but I think that we still work a bit in silos. I mean, you can actually sit in front of another person that has another area of expertise than you. From my perspective, it might be a tech person. And you have the opportunity to talk about different challenges that you experience, but you just sometimes don't do it because you feel that there is a gap between us here. We have so different areas of competences, and he or she won't understand what I mean, and I won't get what he or she says to me. But just start to talk about it. You come a long way if you can just grab a cup of coffee and start talking about those topics and challenges that you have. So cooperate more, I would say, between the different departments.
And you do have, at the end of the day, the same goal, to provide value to your customers.
Yes.
So I think that from that perspective, we can all align and we can all make sure that this is our common goal as well. And I think that when we're talking about common goals, I think having that cross-collaboration between teams is basically the key to success when we implement any new solutions as well.
Yeah, you're totally right. Often you have different goals, different KPIs, and of course then it's hard to find that collaborate way of working. But if you can find maybe one or two or three KPIs that you can align on, then suddenly you have something in common that you're working for together. And when you experience that, it's really like a aha situation that you can contribute with your different competencies to reach this KPI and this goal. Because at the end of the day, you know, we're in the same boat, we have the same customers, we are working in the same company, and if the ship sinks, everyone sinks. And then it doesn't matter if you're a tech person or you're a marketing person or whatever. So have it in mind that we should lift each other and work together. It's hard, but just try to take small steps, and then suddenly maybe you have a cross-functional team working really well, especially when you have a project like this to purchase a new marketing technology system or solution.
And do you have any recommendations for our viewers in terms of these frameworks of working together, creating these collaborative teams?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is that when you try to find a method for working together cross-functional, it's almost always the agile way of working that you use. And I think that it's a good way. It's gonna take some time, depending on how far from each other that you are when you start. But if you can find some kind of way to find your common KPIs, maybe you can plan your work on a high level together, quarterly or every 6 months or something like that, and try to get some kind of sprint way of working on a high level, then I think you have come pretty far. And when you take those small steps, you realize the benefits of working together. And it will be like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, and 2 steps forward again. So it's going to be up and down. But I think at the end of the day, it's a really good way of trying to find that common way of working, to see it in an agile way.
Yeah, and speaking from experience, I think that using this agile methodology can actually help you learn a lot about your team, how do you actually work, and obviously with some tweaks here and there in order for it to make sense to your way of working. I think you can actually take it back and potentially use it for or have it as your default way of working moving forward.
Exactly. And to evaluating a new MarTech solution or tool could be a good way of starting to explore this way of working, but in more of a project way of working then, but in an agile way. So I think that's a good start, and you can do it for sure that way. When we talk about the organizational way of working, I think you should have this in mind too, that you need to identify, okay, so how are we working today when it comes to MarTech solutions and tools? And are we happy with that, or do we want to change it in some way? And find the gap that you probably have working with MarTech solutions today, and where you want to be, and have that as a part of the project too. Because you can always talk with your different vendors that you're seeing in this kind of project, and they have a lot of experience from previous customers that have been in the same situation. Well, they've solved it in this way, or they are working in this way right now, and think about this. And so use the vendors also, and ask them for advice and tips about the organizational and process part of it. And often when you have decided to purchase a system or solution, you have a time of implementation that is probably pretty long. And during that time, it's a great opportunity to also work with the process development within the team that's going to work in the system. So there you have like a natural opportunity to develop a great cross-functional team.
And also the processes that you currently have in the company.
The processes is really important, because in the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what kind of system or tool you choose to purchase. It can be really fancy and have a lot of functions and features, and then you don't have the processes of working with it in your everyday work, and then you're like, oh, you did spend a lot of money on something that you're not using in the most effective way. So that was my take on evaluating the options that you have. Think about your goals and what you want to do, your why with your solution.
Thank you, Linda. And if we're thinking a bit about some of the strategies that have to do with maximizing your ROI, and how would you approach this?
Yeah.
I know that one of the main topics that comes up in discussions before purchasing a solution or when evaluating as well is if we have a good ROI on this solution. So how would you answer this question?
Yeah, this is a hard one. I understand that you get the question. And of course, it's always good and sometimes necessary to have an ROI and to have that discussion. But I think it's also really hard to count on ROI for a MarTech solution, a bit depending on if it's a single tool or if it's a number of different tools. But think about like the process of the development of these tools. It's so fast. There is so many things happening, which means that the vendor you have chosen probably launches a lot of new features in a pace that you really don't know of when you're about to take the decision to purchase it. And those new features could be connected to a pretty large cost sometimes. And you don't know that when you're in the start of implementing it or when you're supposed to take the decision of purchasing it. So that could be something that could be hard to know. And of course you need to count that in when you're thinking about the ROI. So I think it's a bit hard. Maybe you could instead think a bit about the qualitative perspective of purchasing such a system or tool. I mean, what about the processes that you have internally? In what way will those change? In what way will those be more effective for your organization? And what will you be able to save if you implement those kind of cross-functional teams or more effective way of communicating to your users or whatever it is? Think about that instead and try to grade those kind of qualitative perspectives on purchasing a system. And then you can always, it's about an estimation that you do. You get an estimate of the system that you're trying to or that you should purchase. You won't get a number that you can really rely on after 3 years. So it's an estimate. You need to remember that.
So more or less us thinking a bit about not only the purchasing price, but also what happens afterwards, if I understood you correctly. So basically those operating costs that we might have as well during the lifetime of the solution itself.
Of course, really important. And in terms of training, for example, it could be something that you need to buy. It could be something that you need to invest in if you're recruiting new people that should be onboarded in the system. That's a cost that might be hard to know about in the beginning. But all kinds of operational costs involved.
Yeah, and more or less basically the total cost of ownership. So having everything together and using it not necessarily as one fits all or end all solutions, but thinking a bit and having that perspective when it comes to how exactly are you going to evaluate the solution that you're purchasing. So as you mentioned, based on the cost of training, potential one-time setup fees, support, maintenance, anything like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. And when it comes to the total cost of ownership, do you think that by utilizing this way, this approach, would we be any closer to understanding a bit the ROI of our solutions, or?
Yeah, of course, you can always think about the total cost of ownership and understand your ROI a bit better. But I also think that you shouldn't put too much effort and energy in that topic. Of course, you need to know what kind of costs you will have for the lifetime of this tool or system, and you need to have some kind of estimate of your ROI. But maybe it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you identify your goals, your KPIs, and your why. Why should you invest in this system? What would happen if you did not invest in this system? That's another way of approaching this kind of issues or topics that you might have. What would you miss out on if you did not invest in this kind of system? But of course, it's good to have some kind of control over your costs.
Totally agree. So with that being said, let's jump in and see if we have some questions from the audience. So one of the questions that we currently have is, 2023 seems to be the year of AI. What are your thoughts about MarTech solutions integrating AI into their products?
Oh, what is my answer on this one? It's really interesting. It's fascinating. I think that there will be a number of opportunities with this going forward. It's hard to say exactly what you can do or can't do, but one thing that I have with me in this is that you always need that kind of human touch. I think it's hard to not have the human touch in a project with marketing or communication or messaging or brand or whatever. You need to have that human touch. That is my take on the AI for now. I'm just sitting a bit back, leaning back, looking at what's happening in the area. Yeah, I think you should be a bit careful about using it right now. But moving forward, I'm sure there will be a lot of opportunities with it. What do you think, Ovi?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I have played a bit with the tools that have recently emerged. And I do think that you should use it as a co-pilot.
Yeah.
It helps not to start off with a blank sheet of paper. However, I think that the human touch, as you mentioned, can be a differentiator between you and your competition, for example. So while at least at this point in time, the evolution has been quite interesting, and we're seeing advancements basically each and every month.
Yeah.
It's still quite important to make sure that you are in the driver's seat, you control whatever outputs AI might have, and make sure that those are in line with basically what we've discussed since the beginning, with your business goals, with your brand, that they follow your tone of voice if we're talking about content, and making sure that they speak to your customers in the way that they expect you to speak to your customers. So having that approach and that human touch baked in as well.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe to have a kind of a experimental approach to this too. I'm a big fan of testing things, trial and error, see what happens, and maybe experimenting, but doing it in a controlled way, I would say, when it comes to AI. Because how much is your brand worth? How much are you willing to kind of sacrifice if you don't really know how your audience will receive the messages from a robot and not from a human touch point of view? So yeah, I would say have that in mind. But of course, it's really interesting and exciting.
Indeed. Thank you. And another question that we've had is if we can recommend a combination of products and what work well together?
I would say again, if I had the answer to that question, I would be rich. No, I think it's hard to recommend without knowing more about your situation and where you are and where you want to be, like what the gap is. It's all about, again, setting your goals, your KPIs. What is your business strategy? Who is your prioritized target audience? It's a lot of questions that you need to answer before you can say a recommendation like that, I would say. What is your point on this?
Yes, I agree with that, and I think that coming back a bit to the question, like products that work well together, I think this is another aspect that we need to be careful of when it comes to integrations, making sure that any product that we bring into our MarTech stack is compatible or is offers the possibility to be integrated with our current solutions, and thinking a bit about how we would do those data transfers. How do we make sure that, especially if we're talking about data, we are compliant with existing regulations.
Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, I think it boils down to making sure that that product or solution responds to your business needs, and then also making sure that it will fit in well with everything else that you have currently.
Yeah, and also maybe something to consider, I think, is that if you are not happy with the solution that you have today for some reason, you need to, as I have talked about previously, you need to identify, well, what is the challenge and who is having the challenge within the organization. Maybe you have potential in your current system that you aren't aware of. Maybe it's the lack of knowledge internally that is the problem, actually, or the challenge, and that you might not have to buy something new to achieve what you want to achieve. There could be a lot of potential in the solutions that you already have, or in the data that you already have, that you just haven't explored in a broad or deep manner yet. So the case is not always to buy something new and try to create something really fancy and shiny. Exactly. You could also dig where you are and explore your current solution and find potential in that one.
So basically knowing exactly what are the capabilities, and maybe not necessarily focusing so much on the technical side of things, but knowing what capabilities you have, and then reaching out either to your stakeholders or maybe to the vendors themselves with help, and asking for help for the implementation per se.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're a business person, you don't always have that technology, the tech knowledge about the system or what the system can achieve. And maybe that's not even the point here, because you have a lot of knowledge about your business and where you want to be and what goals you have with your business. And if you could just try to transfer the business goals and where you want to be to your tech colleagues, they can then tell you that this is possible, this is not possible, this is what we can do. And also, again, talk to your vendor. What is the capabilities of my current solution? I want to know, because you are a customer. So you can actually, make those demands towards your vendor, and I'm sure they are happy to help you out with those kind of questions, of course.
Most likely.
Yeah.
And one difficult question coming up. Best CRM software for a small B2B company. I think I think we kind of covered this a bit when we talked previously regarding the combination of products and so on, because it's quite difficult for us to actually recommend one software per se, and obviously it has to do a lot with your current needs and level of maturity and so on. But do you see any differences between B2B, B2C MarTech solutions, or how should we think? Should we have a different mindset if we are in the B2B industry versus the B2C industry?
Overall, I think no, because you still have to set your KPIs and your goals and where you want to be with your MarTech solution, what you want to do. But when it comes to the operational perspective of the system, if it's marketing automation or CRM or whatever, there might be some differences in the complexity of the system. I mean, if you have a lot of B2B customers and you have a lot of different stakeholders within that company that is your customer, there are some different approaches and some different system approaches to that topic. So maybe you should have it in mind. I don't think that there is something. It's not a question that will be super important, but it's one operational perspective that is important to have with you. I have been working, when you talk about CRM systems, I have been working in every system from really small with not so many features to really complex solutions. And you know, everything works, but it's more a question of what you want to do and how your customer base is looking and the complexity and at your customers' organization. So it might be a bit different, but not really important, I would say, from my perspective anyway.
I would agree. And one other question that we have is, are there any good resources on MarTech solution comparisons? Or are you using any solutions currently for doing those different comparisons?
That's a really good question. No, I'm not. Are we talking about comparison solutions if you're about to buy a new solution or a new tool? Or I'm sure there is a lot of articles and stuff like that when it comes to compare different tools. But in the end of the day, I think it's more about your requirements. I mean, they can differ a lot between different organizations. So I think it's hard to make that kind of comparison because it's so it could be so different depending on your requirements.
Yeah, I would agree. I know that in the past, one of the solutions that I've used had to do, for example, with review sites where you can see what existing users of those solutions might think of the tool that they're using, how is it working for them, and so on. Yeah. But basically, it's still you would still need to go back and look at your current situation in order to understand if the right fit is there or not. This can help, and obviously I know that a lot of people in product development as well take those reviews and feedback from the users very seriously. Yeah. However, yes, when it comes to these, you would need to take them with a grain of salt and think a bit about your current situation as well. Yeah.
And also, I mean, if you're working with MarTech, you probably have a broad network where you talk about this kind of topics. You have colleagues, you have people you have working with previously. Maybe you're meeting someone at an event or something like that. Talk to people that has knowledge about and experience about those things. Share the knowledge. Ask questions. Yeah, I mean, we have LinkedIn. We can talk about it there, right?
Exactly.
There is a lot of sources of knowledge out there. So try to fetch as much as you can.
Thank you. And I think we still have time for one last question. Would you happen to have a MarTech evaluation cheat sheet with all of these valuable points?
Yeah, I think we can fix that, can't we?
I think so as well.
Yeah.
We can send after the webinar, with the recording, something that can help all of the viewers to basically start the evaluation and get a bit of insights into what they should be looking for.
Yeah, and also please get into contact with us if you have any questions, or if you are unsure of where to start, or whatever, because again, let's simplify this. Let's not make it so complex. Let's have a lot of common sense when we talk about different marketing technology solutions, so that you can feel prepared and prepared for your coming challenges that you have, and opportunities, of course, great opportunities.
Very well put.
Yeah.
And as you can see right now on the screen, we have also shared our QR codes for our LinkedIn profiles. Feel free to connect with us. And thank you so much for tuning in to this Bannerflow webinar. Thank you so much, Linda, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ovi. Really interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, and have a great day, everyone.